Camera's on or off? All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cluster API, our weekly office hours meeting. It is the 12th of March. We do this every week. We are a sub-project of SIG Cluster Lifecycle, and as you're probably well aware, that means we abide by the SCL Kubernetes Community Rules of Conduct, which we can basically summarize as everybody try to make this a nice, welcoming place. Try not to talk over each other. Use the raise hand feature. I am really bad at noticing that, so I will try to keep an eye out. But if I didn't notice you raised your hand, then please feel free to interrupt. If you want to add your name to the attendee list here, please do so. And if we have anyone who is here for the first time or wants to reintroduce themselves or anything, I'll be quiet for a minute, and please feel free to unmute and say hello. Seems like it's mostly the usual suspects, so we will keep going. First, we have open proposal readouts. And all we have is the in-place updates proposal. Does anyone have anything to offer on the in-place updates? Seems like no. So, oops.
Matt, as far as I know, there was they pushed some changes to the proposal. So if folks have bandwidth to review, please take a look. I remember a message is Slack.
Okay. So there have been some changes. Please check in if you have bandwidth too. Okay. Let's move on to discussion topics. First, I already spoilered this one, but Chris, go ahead.
I added in place of Chris.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Just to keep track.
Just
to keep track who has the Zoom admin role in case we need it in the future. Thank you for doing this, Chris, by the way.
Yeah, and for the sake of the recording, now you can share your full screen. Yay. Someone just had to click a button.
Which I'm not going to do because that usually gets me in trouble when I've done that, but all right, great. So next is Fabrizio talking about V1 beta 2 types work.
Okay, so hello everyone, thank you. So next week we will have a code freeze, an early code freeze for this release cycle, and we will start cutting and we will create the release branch. After that, we will be able finally to start the work for V1 beta 2 types. And V1 beta 2 types are planned to be completed before into the V1.11 release, which is roughly August, in August. So just a few reminder about how this work is going to happen, because it will be relevant not only for Cluster API project, but also for all the consumers. So the work will happen on on the main branch in Cluster API. We start after confreeze and the relation and the creation of the release branch. The main change that this work implies, so the main feature that we are going to add in V1 beta 2 types is the fact that we are going to switch from old to new condition. That means that the content of the current status V1 beta 2 condition field will become status condition. And the content of the current status condition will become status deprecated V1 beta 2 conditions. Okay, so we are going to switch them, basically. Just a reminder, all conditions are going to be kept around until the removal of V1 beta 1, which is 1 year after we release V1 beta 2, so August 2026. And when we are going to remove all condition, we are also going to remove all condition types and utils as defined in the proposal. And I make the first stop before moving to the last point. Is there any questions, concern? Okie dokie. So moving on, call for action. It is not the first time that I'm bringing this up, but we are still missing the V1 beta 2 condition for machine pools because we discussed it a few times machine pool contributors issue. So what will happen if no one volunteers before the code freeze in V1.11? In V1 beta 2 status condition for a machine pool will be empty. The old condition will still be around as we discussed, but this is what is going to happen if no one step up to help for machine pools.
Yeah, Joel, go ahead.
I know in the past we've always promoted every resource at the same time, but given that there isn't much going on with machine pool at the moment and we don't have anyone contributing to it, is it worth creating a V1 beta 2 of machine pool at this point in time, or should we leave it as V1 beta 1 until the point where we're ready to start moving it forward?
Stefan?
My angle there is a little bit like which of the two is less work? And I think promoting to beta 2 is less work. One part of it is we were planning to get rid of all the condition utils for beta 1, but if you basically permanently keep machine pools on beta 1, we have to keep this around I don't know how long. And then there's also stuff like machine pools are embedding machine spec view on beta 1, so you also have to keep this around. And it's using, I mean, it's definitely sharing the contract of Bootstrap, right? You can put a Bootstrap config in a machine or config template in a machine deployment and a config in a. So I generally agree with the sentiment. That's not a problem. I'm just wondering, like, how much work it will literally add to try to keep machine pools on that level. I think in general, I would definitely try to get to a point where we can do a little bit more fine granular bumps of stuff. I think one angle could be to basically probably make a difference between the core group and stuff like add-ons and IPAM, I don't know what. What is relatively cross-cutting in this case is we have the conditions everywhere, and we want to get rid of the old conditions. That basically affects like every single CRD that we have. I think otherwise there could be basically the split where you say like, okay, we have resources that are in core and also like have something to do with with the contract. I mean, not every, like, I don't know, there's like cluster resource that has absolutely nothing to do with the contract, but a cluster has machine deployment, has machine pool, has machine set. They're all like in the middle of this. So yeah, maybe we can get to the point within beta 2 that for beta 3 we don't have the same problem for machine pools, but I'm not sure. I mean, definitely we don't have the condition problem again. That one is gone. What I definitely also have on the list, what I would try to do is we have a bit of an annoying coupling in the sense of we are embedding machine spec. I mean, literally the struct that we use in the machine type within machine set, machine deployment, and machine pools. And my ideal state, I think, would be that we don't embed it anywhere because there is stuff in there that simply does not belong in the other APIs. So it does not make sense that a machine deployment has a provider ID field for a machine. Like, I mean, why? Okay, because it was easy to embed. But I mean, as we learned in the past, I think like just embedding stuff everywhere leads to the problems that not every field on every API makes any sense, or some of them don't make sense. Let's say it this way around. So yeah, maybe this sort of stuff definitely gets us in the direction where we're more decoupled. In general, the way this is currently going, I would really hope that we get to a point that we can graduate a large part of copy to V1, and I don't see machine pools getting there at the same time with the way this currently goes. And at the latest then, I would not hold back like everything, just because we have some parts that are not making any progress and they're basically unmaintained. Okay, talked a lot. I hope most of it made sense.
That's good info.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. Yeah, it's a real shame how much it's tied together at the moment, and I agree that decoupling that would be better. So yeah, I guess we have to move it along.
Is that orthogonal, or is that really related to the conditions thing? Is that just something else that we should do?
I think it is related, right? Like the work that was done already allows the V1 beta 1 and V1 beta 2 conditions to kind of have the conversion between them. And I think what we're saying is that's not done for machine pool, which means
Right.
that that conversion of conditions between V1 beta 1 and V1 beta 2 won't happen for machine pools. And so I guess anyone using it when they upgrade and they have both API versions, they won't be converted correctly.
I see.
Yeah, I think what happens in reality is the conversion is not a problem. The problem is that basically on all our other APIs, we have now a regular condition field, basically before beta 1 conditions, but just the regular ones. And we have an additional one with the beta 2 conditions. And once we go to beta 2, basically this flips. The main conditions will be the one of beta 2, and then we have to keep the old ones around. So we still have both, but we are flipping the fields where they are. And then we can do basically round trips. But round trip is not a problem. The problem is literally that for machine pools, there are no beta 2 conditions. So once we, in all our other APIs, would promote beta 2 to our top level conditions, there is nothing there for machine pools. It's just not implemented. So we would only have conditions in this old V1 beta 1 deprecated field, while the new one is literally empty.
Yes, I think I understand.
Yeah, but round tripping still works between the API types beta 1 and beta 2.
Well, hopefully no one laughs at this, but I would like to, I'd like to volunteer to do this. We certainly use, because I fully realize at this point, machine pools have been limping along and we've made some promises about increased support, but we do use machine pools quite a bit in CapZ, and we certainly don't want them to fall behind. And we still have the goal of, getting them promoted to first class, although it seems less realistic. But certainly, at least this task, I think, is something I'd like to take a stab at. So
sounds good.
Let's just do that.
Perfect. Yeah, I would say take a look. The place where I would start is definitely taking a look at the proposal that Fabrizio wrote, where we have outlined like basically how we would see what would have to be done in machine pools, and then I guess let's just chat about details or yeah, if necessary.
Okay. Cool. I'm really glad you pointed this out. Do we have any other comments or questions about the V1 beta 2 types? I don't see any hands raised.
I just want to add one last point. So in order to help folks to start adopting V1 beta 2 condition, we are planning to do an alpha release with V1.11 possibly end of May. And this will give to Cluster API users basically 2 additional months or 1 month and a half of testing room. So we are planning to do the bulk of the work before May, and then we go on with minor changes, and we reach and then we will have beta and RC in July like usual. So yeah, we're trying to help basically folks to do the move with the necessary time.
Yep. That's why we're cutting the release branch for 110 and starting all that next week instead of waiting longer. Great. Any other comments on this item? I guess not. Let's move on to Stefan has an FYI.
Yep. Yeah, just FYI. We merged a few PRs recently, just want to share essentially. So we took a little bit a closer look at the way that cluster class is currently orchestrating Kubernetes
my.
upgrades. Oh my God, what did I do here?
I don't know. Microsoft doesn't like that. Ignore, sorry.
Yeah, I'm also getting this strange error on the PR for some reason. Do we know why this is happening?
Just that PR?
Is it just my PR?
Let's see. No, no,
Okay.
it's got to be something
I've
local.
observed that in the past, yeah, for
Huh?
sure.
It sounds like
Yeah, I've observed
Microsoft
that.
does not trust GitHub anymore.
No, it's actually only on this PR for some reason. I don't know why. Somebody reported it maybe.
I've noticed that in the past with direct links to specific comments in threads, for example, on GitHub, so not the GitHub main page.
But it was showing like Microsoft Defender or something, right? So I'm not getting those errors in Chrome. Just I don't know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to distract. I'm sure there's nothing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Whatever.
Microsoft
Okay.
Defender Smart Screen. I don't know. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so we were taking a bit of a closer look at how cluster class are starting upgrades, basically upgrading control plane and machine deployments and all of that stuff, and especially in some edge cases. And basically, we are limiting a little bit the concurrency on a few places because basically they were ending up in like bad places. So the first PR is basically what you could do before is essentially trigger like multiple patch version upgrades while some other upgrades are running. And we were hitting some edge cases there. So basically this PR makes sure. So we already implemented a check a while ago. So what we tried to do a while ago is that basically if you want to increase the version number, so class spec topology version. So big disclaimer, this only affects cluster class, the same point as well. So if you're not using cluster class, it doesn't affect you. So if you want to change the version field there, basically what we implemented is that we are checking if there's currently already a rollout in progress that could be potentially like affected by you triggering another upgrade on top. The only problem with that check is that it was only looking at minor version upgrades. And I think that wasn't even intentional. So what we're now doing is basically looking at any sort of upgrades, even patch version upgrades, that basically there is only one upgrade going on at one point in time. You have to wait until that completes. And then you can trigger another one. Yeah, that's one point. And the other one is a bit related to that. Basically, we have some machines that pre-flight checks that are supposed to make sure that while an upgrade is going on, basically we are only creating new worker machines that are actually safe to be created. And what this new check is basically doing, it makes sure that if there's an upgrade going on, if the target Kubernetes version is not on your machine deployment already, it won't create a machine set of the old version. Basically, the idea behind that is we could recreate machines like through remediations or something, but as soon as the control plane is upgraded, the machine deployment will also get a version, and then we're just going to replace the machine that we just created. So it's like a bit of an efficiency thing. But just big disclaimer here, what this PR also did is it added a command line option so that we have 4 pre-flight checks, and this is basically the 4th one that we added. But the command line options basically allows to only to disable some of them. So if you don't like that one or one of the other ones that we already had, you can just turn them off entirely. Before this PR, we only had a feature gate, but this feature gate will eventually go away. But now we have basically a permanent option to disable some of that. Yeah, I don't know if that made sense. I could probably talk like half an hour about edge cases, but that's probably not a good investment. Then I would go to the third point. That's unrelated to the other two. It's just also something that I want to share. So there has been a bunch of work going on the last 1, 2, 3 weeks from Joel and a bunch of other people, and I also did some part of it. Can you open that issue? Copy 11834. I mean, assuming you can open it. Let's see if it works. Yeah, okay. So basically, Joel has this new nice linter that he shared like in the previous meeting. And basically, we have been in API linter. That's important to mention. So basically, the goal here is to lint API Go structs to make sure that they follow API conventions and set useful markers, are not using weird JSON tags and a bunch of other stuff. And basically, we have enabled them over the last few weeks. Most of them are not intrusive in the sense of they're not changing the CRD YAML or have any impact at runtime, but some of them have. So, for example, let's just pick one random example. if you have an array somewhere, before those changes, basically you could just put however many data, an arbitrary amount of data in there until you reach like the 3 MB like max object size in Kubernetes. Now we basically set some upper limits for two reasons. On one side, that we have like a clear upper bounds and not just, oh, at some point etcd doesn't like it. And on the other side, by having those boundaries, basically we can in the future add cell validations, because when you try to add a cell rule, the API server basically tries to calculate how expensive would it be to run the cell rule at runtime when you create a custom resource later. And if you don't set any boundaries here, it always assumes the worst case. So that makes it very hard to add any cell rules if the API server always assumes that your fields and your arrays are just huge. So basically in this step, we added a bunch of those boundaries. So going forward, potentially, depending on use case, we can also add cell rules on top. Yeah, why I'm sharing this? So we try to set really like useful values here carefully in a way that should not break anyone. But nobody can guarantee that. So basically, if you definitely try to test early, like with the betas and RCs, let us know if you run into problems. And we can basically discuss if some of those boundaries are too low or we added some validation that breaks someone. We try to be really careful, but who knows? Yeah, I think that summarizes it. I'm not sure if you have something spontaneously to add.
The only thing I'd add is so the linter that we're working on will eventually be donated to SIG API Machinery. I'm currently in discussion with them about what the minimum bar is to get it donated. And there's a lot more rules to come. So I think there's like 10 rules implemented, and there's like another 12 or 13 that are already like marked up as to be done. So if you have some spare cycles and want to find out what writing a linter is like, help wanted. And the other thing I would say is that, now that we're getting this on the core CAPI providers, it'd be really awesome to get it on some of the kind of provider specific APIs as well, as those are evolving. Because I think, the more we can enable these linters, the easier it will make API review over time for folks, and the more we can get, better with following the API conventions. And if you have any questions, you know where I am.
Yeah, maybe one important note there. I think we mentioned this in the previous call, but the way we did this in Core Copy is basically we are also initially we applied this also to existing API types, and then we added like a few very specific excludes for things that we didn't want to change. But there are basically two ways to run. Two, maybe three ways to run this. You can either just run a lint on your entire code base and just see what pops up, and then either fix everything or add excludes for the stuff you don't want to fix. But you can also just enable it in a way that it only looks at the delta. So basically, stop the bleeding, right? Every new thing you add, at least that one will follow the API conventions, while you don't necessarily have to fix like all your existing findings. I mean, ideally you do, but I think just even adding it with that it only lints new stuff is already better than not having it at all, and actually makes it easier to add APIs and not relying too much on manual API reviews.
Yeah, that's nice. Fabrizio.
I just want to give a shout out to, I hope to pronounce the name well, Sivachari, which is a contributor in, I guess, in Japan, which is so I'm probably won't be here in this meeting, but it's taking up a lot of work, and especially in this area. So really nice to see new contributors stepping up in Cluster API. And yeah, thank you.
They've also been really helpful. They found a few bugs in the linter and actually submitted PRs to fix the bugs as well, which was awesome.
That's great. Cool. If we don't have any more questions about linting, move on to the next item. Mohammed, you want to take it away?
Yes, hi. So last week or the week before, we had a discussion for the use case for cluster API and open cluster management. So would you open the BBT in the end? Maybe just to remind everyone about what was the discussion? Like if you scroll down to the last two, yeah, this one. Yeah, so the case here, do you guys remember? Do you gonna make a quick refresh on slide number 5, where we use open cluster management to with cluster API copy to provision cluster, as well as the OCM deploying for workload and whenever like it's required to be in those provision cluster. And we have the proposal for the namespace separation that has been written by Merrick, but unfortunately for time zone he's not able to attend today. But the proposal was about having starting the copy controller that can watching multiple namespace or excluding some namespaces due to the requirement of namespace isolation in this deployment that we have in the slide number 5, that we need a real isolation between the cluster namespaces that is created by open cluster management and by the namespaces that cluster API use to create clusters. And as we discussed last time, that not sure, maybe Stefan and Fabriaz, you guys having an opinion that having an namespace separation is the best solution. So I just want to cycle again on this. Why it's not the best solution? If it's not, do you guys have another thoughts, another idea how we can achieve this complex deployment that we have here?
Anyone have feedback? I wasn't here last week, so this is new to me.
I have an opinion, but I just don't know if it makes sense with Fabrizio. So I don't know about a use case and on which level you're basically supporting like which use case in Kabi, where you say like, oh yeah, here like this is like the full thing you want to do, and we just support like 100% of that. So I have like a technical opinion on how I would make it work, what you're trying to do, and it's probably not much different to what you're suggesting. But I don't know if you're already done with like, hey, we're all happy with that use case.
So does that mean is the namespace separation proposal is something that we can make it move forward, or like what you're suggesting here, like, or do
So
you want
what-
me to go through the use case again just to clarify it more?
I'm personally fine with it in general. With the, so what? So my personal, just my opinion, right? I can't speak for anyone else. So
Go ahead.
my main problem with the process is a little bit that we're basically saying like, okay, we have to modify this watch that the watch only does like watch check this namespace, right? What I would feel much more comfortable with if the definition is not specifically, oh, we have to modify the watch in that way. If it's more like copy should work in a way. One instance of copy should work in a way that it only reconciles classes in a certain namespace or ignores classes in a certain namespace, because that gives us option for implementation, right? It's not just, okay, this setting in a cache. I mean, the consequence is probably that maybe it's more than just a cache, that we have to modify the cache. But I think it's like a little bit more decoupled from like, okay, this exact setting in the watch down there. And I think if we go a little bit further away from the concrete cache configuration and say like, okay, what do you want to support is copy should be able to only reconcile classes, and reconcile, that's a keyword here, not watch, reconcile.
Yeah.
Classes in a certain namespace or ignore classes in other namespaces, then I think that's way more achievable and then just jumping on the watch configuration basically. And I think what you have down there also goes like in a similar direction. One thing is the reconcilers. Then we have to think about like how this works for the webhook. So what is the way that webhooks are supposed to work here? Should there also be like webhook only acts on a certain namespace, or is it like copy should either run the webhooks or not? Probably it's already on a slide. I'm just saying like we have to decide this sort of stuff. And I think we also have to make a decision on cluster-wide objects that are getting reconciled, because there's no namespace separation there, right? You can either turn it on or off probably. But you cannot say only reconcile cluster-wide objects of a namespace because they are not in a namespace. I don't know if there's much more on the technical level. On the other side, it's probably like you definitely have to nail down like goals and non-goals in a sense of. I know that a large part of the proposal is basically just trying to give us context, but what I'm not sure is basically just the way that it's written is like, okay, if I'm going to say, yeah, that's all fine, am I basically signing off that I have to support like all that is there with like totally unknown consequences for the implementation? So I think that would be just good to have like a clear separation a bit between, hey, this is just all useful context to understand why we want this versus this is the entire thing that we're signing off on that we're going to support end to end. And if there's like a problem with any one of that piece, then we already agreed on that we also have to fix this. That's just a bit, for me, it's like I read the proposal and it was, thanks for trying to add all this context. It's just, in some parts, I'm just like, okay, what am I signing up for? If I'm going to say like,
Okay, I understand.
all of this stuff. I get like there are like a million features in there to make like the whole thing work. But yeah, I mean, in the end, it comes down to, I think, only like 2 or 3 very specific behaviors that we want from our controllers, which is like, yeah, I mean, the namespace thing. I mean, I also know how we got there because we were starting from the first PRs, from like the flags, and then we said, oh, we need more information and propose an offset. But yeah, maybe that helps a bit to understand like where I'm coming from.
Yeah, okay, sure. I understand that a lot of comments actually as well in the proposal make it a bit hard, to understand. So yeah, okay. So maybe like as a next step, maybe we can put more effort on clarifying the use case, make it simple, and yeah, let's take it from there. Yeah. Go ahead, Richard. You have your hand, I guess.
Yeah, what could be also helpful is maybe if we so currently we're pretty busy with like code freeze next week and that sort of stuff, which is why we're pretty low on bandwidth. Maybe it makes sense to circle back in a week or 2. I probably let Fabrizio speak to that. Just currently it's a bit much pressure on our side to get all the stuff done in time.
Richard, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, so apologies, I haven't actually read the proposal yet, but something that comes to mind as well is a lot of people are using CAPI operator to install CAPI in the providers. So there will be some knock-on work in CAPI operator as well to support. If this was a route you're going to go down multiple instances of providers and stuff, because I'm not sure that it currently supports that. That's probably just something to be aware of as well.
Well, we didn't really consider you talk about the cluster API operator, we talk about the only CAPI providers. Can you clarify that?
The cluster API operator.
Yeah, we didn't really use it to deploy the other providers. We mainly use like cluster control, or we use like a Git repo or ABCD GitOps approach, but I'm not sure if that's gonna affect the cluster API operator way of deploying things. I'm not sure. Like the normal behavior is there, like having as of today, the cluster API operator will work. If you choose to watch like control, like run the control in different in a group of namespaces, it should be the same behavior. Like I don't see this could make a different behavior, but maybe worth to investigate as we'll look to it. Yes.
Yeah, I guess, you still support the same behavior, but you won't be able to support this new behavior with CAPI operator as it stands.
Fabrizio.
Yeah, I think that the main point is what we are signing up for or what we are supporting. So today we have those flags, minus minus namespace, minus minus watch labels. They are a legacy of the past, but no one, and they are there because when we got to the conclusion it's not possible to run master multiple cluster API instances, and we dropped all the support, we decided, okay, let's leave them. But it was also another time for cluster API. it was, let's leave them. If someone want to experiment, they should be able to. But as of today, cluster API is a different level of maturity. So in my opinion, we cannot accept to add more stuff to a feature that no one knows how to make it work. Because honestly, I'm not aware. I know that the team that tried hard to run multiple instances of Capi failed and decided to give it up. I don't know of other teams that are capable to solve the problem that Stefan was bringing up. And what we do with Webhook, what we do with global resources, how do we avoid issue due to version skew? Not only to persistent version skew, but also to temporary version skew that might happen during an upgrade and stuff like that. So I'm not against the feature, but if we add a feature and we somehow want to claim we support, we need to have the full story. It's not, oh, deploy your stuff and set this flag. How do I upgrade? How do I manage this? How should I deploy? And this is what most concerns me. I don't think that we are in a state where we already have 2 flags in our controllers, and not only in our controller, we are also recommending to all the providers to add those flags. But we don't know how to use them. So I think that or we are really good in writing down limitation and stuff like that, or we should not add more unless we have a full story to tell. But yeah, maybe this is how I see. Honestly, whenever we have something in cluster API, the scope explode. If I think to cluster cattle move or other discussion, we make some utilities and then people start using them and new use cases arise. I'm happy about this, but we are also to make sure to be in a place to handle the fallout of what we expose, the consequence of what we expose. So this is where my comments come from. I'm not against the use case. The use case is also somehow clear to me. Honestly, I have tried a different solution, at least when I saw the slide, but I'm not thinking to this. But if we want to really go down the path, how do we support this? Add something and claim support for it. We have to have the end-to-end story. It's not just adding a flag.
Well, okay. Well, so that's what we're trying to do. So as we proposing that in the first time, we realized that having 2 different versions will put us in real trouble. So then we adopt the work to only support the same version. And we evolve in that direction to make sure that the full end-to-end story that we are trying to use here is clear to everyone. So maybe as well we could add more details and upgrade process. And actually, in fact, we are testing that. So locally in our work, we're testing how to upgrade to same copy instance in running in one cluster. And this sounds reasonable, like to do. And like the upgrade process could be simply by scaling down into 0 the replicas and then do the upgrade, and then things should work fine. So we are testing that, we're investigating this, but upgrade is one case. The webhook, as we investigated, is not a big issue as they are same version. And during upgrade, everything is scaled down, so there is no real issue there as long as we are maintaining the same version. It's clearly in the proposal and here in the slides. I'm not talking about 2 different versions of Kabi. You're running 1.9 and you're running 1.9. You cannot run 1.9 with 1.10. This is not going to work. So yeah, so maybe we add more as well in the proposal how we can go through the end to end by doing upgrade, like rollback as well. Like if something happened, you want to roll back, maybe this could be another interesting edge case. But yeah, okay. So then let's work on this. And in any way, the BR that Merrick was pushing for the feature flag, he is also proposing to add end-to-end test for it. So it's just we're not like, putting the stuff and we're not making sure that it's working. So I mean, we're trying to do our best effort to make things work as you guys expect. We're not just like, throwing the what we need and don't really follow up on it.
Stefan, go ahead.
Yep. Two comments. First one. If you end up that by saying, hey, like here's like this full scenario that we're also supporting and you can deploy it by setting these and these flags, probably it makes sense if that is like a bit of a simplified version of your full picture here. More like, okay, hey, you have one management cluster, you have two instances of the copy controllers, and now let's do the thing where basically they are just reconciling different subsets of namespaces versus going with like, okay, we have like 2 or 3 hierarchies of management clusters over each other that are doing mirroring and I don't know what, because that's probably something that is like would be very, very hard to say like, okay, yeah, we make sure and test that like this hierarchy thing and everything works. The other thing, just to explain the webhook problem. The webhook problem that I potentially see is the following. So a regular normal webhook is not necessarily a problem because a normal webhook, you put an object in there, it validates the object, it changes some stuff, or it gives some validation errors, end of story. The problem is more, we have some webhooks. Concrete example. I don't know how many we have, but we have some of them. So let's say we have the cluster webhook. So you get a request for a certain cluster object. The cluster object retrieves the corresponding cluster class object. The cluster class object can be either in the same or in another namespace. Okay. Now let's imagine you have one webhook. That webhook has, based on like the very specific requirement, has a cache config that it only watches certain namespaces. Now this webhook or this binary, which hosts the webhook and has a watch flag to only some namespaces, this one now gets a cluster object which uses a cluster class that is not in one of your watch namespaces. What will happen is that the webhook will get a not found response from the local cache. That's where I'm coming from with the webhook problem.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you just put this flag in a watch and say like, okay, this instance only sees like a subset of the cluster only this namespace, and then you get a request for something else that is not showing up in your cache, then the webhook simply won't work and gives you errors. So that's where I was coming from with like, either you have to like basically not nail down the cache to only see some namespaces.
Yeah.
Basically, the cache sees everything, but we're still only reconciling a subset. I mean, that's the difference. We can make that work, right? By just having something in our, basically at the beginning of our reconciles that filters out stuff and not down below in our cache. Or the other way is probably that you configure the webhooks in a way that each of the webhooks that doesn't work. So for most objects, it would work that you say, oh, this webhook, it only watches certain namespaces and only is called for objects of certain namespaces. Like I'm only getting objects for a cluster of the namespace I'm also watching. But the problem is with cluster and cluster class, we have cross namespace references. So if you watch a cluster in namespace A that uses a cluster class in namespace B, and you're only watching namespace A and get an event you get a cluster object in your webhook for namespace A, you still won't find a cluster class that is B because you're not watching it. It's not in your cache. So yeah, that's where like the webhook problems are showing up.
Yeah. Okay. To me, it's like an edge case, but if that happened, it's an end user mistake. He is referring to a cluster class that exists in a namespace that he's not supposed to do. So we need to make sure that we can like.
There are two things, right? I mean, one thing is like the cross namespace thing, which is especially tricky. But if you would have one webhook that gets clusters of all namespaces, then it's not even. Then you also hit a problem if the cluster is using cluster class from the same namespace, because there's no guarantee that if you get all the cluster objects in your webhook, if you only watch a subset of namespaces, the user might be doing nothing wrong, and it's just the way that this webhook gets all clusters of all namespaces, while the controller only sees some of them. That is the problem.
Okay. We then look to it, and I'm gonna chat with you a bit, like maybe in Slack, to get more info about it.
Fabrizio?
You muted.
Oh yeah, you're muted. Sorry.
Fabrizio, you muted.
Sorry. So 2 points. The first one is that you cannot make assumption that cluster API providers work like cluster API, so they are mostly namespace covered, because we don't have any constraints. So as of today, providers are fully free to implement global resources, and for instance, there was even a proposal to implement a global resource for identity management that can access the secret that are in a different namespace. So the assumption that a cluster exists in a namespace is simply, I think it's a wrong assumption, because we cannot make such type of assumption on providers. You can look into a few providers and tell, oh, they are working this way, but it is by chance, not because it is regulated by our contract or stuff like that.
Just to clarify, Fabrizio, what you mean is, of course, we know that the cluster object itself is in one namespace, but what we don't know is if basically other parts that this cluster object depends on is like in other namespaces or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. There is no such a constraint for provider, and provider implemented can have used the global resources because they exist in Kubernetes, and if this was simpler for them, it was perfectly acceptable. This is the first point. The second point.
Yeah, so hold on, Fabrizio. Can you just clarify this again? So let's take a concrete example. Like, for example, if I'm using Kappa or KapZ, and I want to have my copy object refer to one of the providers' created custom resources. So we assume, as in this proposal, that both are running and watching the same namespaces we are talking about. But you are mentioning here if the provider is not enforced to do that, will make problem. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Let me say,
okay.
you cannot make an assumption that
Yes.
everything related to a cluster exists in a namespace. In Cluster API, we have only 1 or 2 exceptions to this rule, which is cluster class and extension config, probably, top of mind. But in provider, I don't know. I simply don't know. There could be many exceptions. For instance, I know that in KapV there is the identity, vSphere identities, the cluster identities, thank you, Christian, which are global resources, and they are used by clusters in KapV. So
Same for Kappa as well.
yeah, probably same for Kappa. So you cannot make this assumption. Now, I don't remember exactly the detail of cluster resources, but the point is there is nothing that constrains providers to keep everything into a namespace. Just to bring another point to the table. And the other angle that I want to bring up is, depending of the complexity so if I think at this, the complexity of the discussion, and I think to the complexity of the discussion that we had 1 or 2 weeks ago about API deprecation, storage migration, managed field cleanups, etc. We have really to be careful that is something that as a project we can take in. So it is not, we are talking about a lot of complexity. So I'm okay in trying to figure it out. But before committing to take this, we have to really think carefully, because as of today, cluster cattle upgrade test with only one provider are the most flaky thing and the biggest source of work for the release CI team. If you want to add more complexity, you have to, for instance, to think about double down the size of the release team or stuff like that. So it is not just implement a few end-to-end tests. It is keeping them running, and so let's think carefully about this. It is complex. It is dreadfully complex.
Well, okay, sure, yeah. So thanks for bringing up the providers because, like, we assuming it's like I'm not sure why someone wanna run Kabi in a certain namespace and then he run the provider that watch other namespaces. So, but we need to put a constraint on that. So how we can enforce this constraint once you run Kabi with a namespace, you need to run your provider as well as in the same namespace that you run Kapi to it. How we can build this relation that might be more that need more thoughts. How we can make that, but it was an assumption more than real, enforcing mechanism.
Do we have any other comments on this? We only have 5 minutes left, so we should probably move on to the provider updates. But that was very interesting. Any final comments? All right, let's move on. Thanks, Mohammed, very much.
Thanks, guys.
Provider updates. Richard, Micro VM.
Yep, I'll keep it quick. Yeah, so the Micro VM provider has 2 new releases released. It has been resurrected as well, so it supports CAPI 1.9 and also has a Vitari FS support as well. So this was dead for a long time, this provider, but in the last 2 or 3 months, it's been resurrected. So if anyone's interested. Also, I can move on to the Kappa one. So there's a new release coming out. We haven't had a new release for quite some time. There's been a bunch of issues that we needed to get fixed. And also we are struggling with just a number of people. So that takes me on to that. Next bit is Kappa also needs new contributors. We've got 47 open PRs. Never really goes below 40. So we're just struggling to get the reviews like all providers, all projects. So really just hey, things might take longer, but also if you're interested, just reach out, and I know the active maintainers would be more than willing to help coach you through any new changes. But yeah, expect a new release shortly. I've got one issue to on PR to merge, and then we'll get a new release out. But that's it.
Good stuff. That is all we had on the agenda. Does anybody want to add anything at the last minute here? Going once, going twice. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I just had a quick question about, I guess we're still a couple weeks out, so maybe it's not, we don't have to think about it so much, but just like, are we gonna we'll not meet the week of KubeCon. Are we gonna take the week after KubeCon off as well? Or maybe just something to think about for next time?
Because Easter, right? Or what is the week after KubeCon? Just wondering.
It's like April, like 11th through the something? I don't know. Something like that. April 9th through the 12th, or maybe the 14th.
That's the week before Easter.
I think it's 20th. I mean, Easter Sunday is 20th. Yeah, anyway, I mean, we have time to talk about it. Oh, good. I was just wondering.
I guess the question is, are we meeting April 9th or not? That may be a question for next time.
Is that KubeCon week, or is that the week after?
Week after.
Okay.
That's the week after, yeah.
All right, let me put it on here so I remember. All right, I think that's it. Thanks everybody for coming. We'll see you here hopefully next week. Have a great week.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
You
Later.
bet.